Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into the disturbing story of a once promising sports star whose life took a shocking turn. This is the tale of a talented Puerto Rican boxer who rose to fame in the 2012 London Summer Olympics, only to later become the subject of headlines for a very different reason. Back in 2012, during the Summer Olympics in London, a young Puerto Rican boxer named Félix Verdejo caught the world's attention. Nicknamed the Diamond, he was seen as one of the most gifted and hopeful athletes to come out of Puerto Rico. Experts and fans alike believed he was destined to become a world champion and win Olympic gold. At that time, his future in boxing looked incredibly bright, filled with opportunities and potential. But by 2021, his name returned to the global spotlight not for his achievements in the ring, but due to a shocking criminal case. This tragedy stemmed from a youthful relationship that spiraled into obsession, eventually leading to an unthinkable crime. The very man once celebrated for his knockout power, whose 2014 performance was even praised by two-time Olympic gold medalist Vasyl Lomachenko, found himself facing a possible death sentence. In the end, he received a life sentence instead. Despite overwhelming evidence and a confession from a co-conspirator, Verdejo continues to deny any involvement in the crime. Born on May 19, 1993, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Félix grew up in a large and humble household. As a child, he initially dreamed of becoming a baseball player. However, fate had other plans. At the age of 9, after a backyard argument with a visiting boy turned physical, an adult suggested he take up boxing if he wanted to fight. That comment led Félix to his first visit to a boxing gym, and from the moment he stepped inside, he fell in love with the sport. By 16, he had already won the Pan American Junior Championships. The following year, he claimed the national title. Then, in 2012, he competed in the London Olympics and reached the quarterfinals. That same year marked the beginning of his professional boxing journey. Throughout his career, Verdejo fought in 29 professional matches, securing 27 impressive wins. In 2014, he delivered what was named the year's most spectacular knockout against Sergio Villanueva. The next year, he captured the WBO Latino lightweight title and successfully defended it 6 times over the next 2 years. Fans and experts were convinced that this rising star was destined to leave a lasting legacy in the world of boxing. Now let's introduce Keishla Rodríguez. Born in November 1993, also in San Juan, her full name was Keishla Marlene Rodríguez Ortiz. Her story tragically intertwines with the boxers, and it would ultimately lead to a devastating end. Jos and Keishla Rodríguez had another daughter named Bereliz Nicole. Alongside their children, the couple also raised Jonathan, Keishla's son from a previous relationship. From a young age, Keishla was known for being friendly, outgoing, and compassionate. She did well academically and had a deep love for animals, even dreaming of one day becoming a veterinarian. Her closest companion growing up was her sister Bereliz, who she trusted completely. The two shared everything: their thoughts, worries, and personal lives. Keishla attended school with Félix Verdejo, and as they were the same age, they had known each other since they were kids. During their teenage years, their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. In 2011, Keishla's parents separated, and her mother moved to Florida. By that time, both sisters were young adults and decided to remain in San Juan, keeping close despite leading their own lives. At 18, Félix, already a rising name in boxing after competing in the Olympics, began dating a younger girl named Eliza Mara Santiago Sierra. She was only 14 years old at the time and still in school, but she had ambitions of becoming a model and envisioned a future with the young athlete. Surprisingly, her parents approved of the relationship. By this point, Félix was enjoying widespread fame. Handsome and successful, he drew the attention of many fans, particularly women. Though he had a committed relationship with Eliza, he continued seeing Keishla in secret. Keishla's mother and sister were aware of the situation and strongly disapproved of the continued involvement, especially knowing he was already committed to another woman. The situation became increasingly complicated. Eliza believed she was the athlete's only true love and was making plans for a life together, including marriage. Meanwhile, Keishla was caught in a difficult emotional bind. Though she knew Félix had a fiancée, he continued to pursue her, and since he had been her first love, she held on to hope that their relationship might still have a future. In 2016, Félix married Eliza, who by then was almost 19 years old. By that time, Eliza had already built a following online as a model and had launched a successful beauty business specializing in eyelash extensions. Later that same year, tragedy struck. While riding his motorcycle at high speed, Félix was involved in a serious crash. He suffered head trauma, multiple bruises, and lacerations, and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. His trainer, Ricky Enriquez, feared that the accident might derail the boxer's career just as he was reaching the height of his fame. Despite doctors' concerns following his serious motorcycle crash, Félix made a surprisingly fast recovery and was soon back in the boxing ring. In September 2019, he shared a photo on his social media featuring Eliza, who was heavily pregnant at the time. In the caption, he wrote, "Soon I'll meet Daddy's little princess." Just a month later, he proudly announced the birth of their daughter, Miranda Verdejo Santiago. Publicly, Félix appeared to be a devoted husband and a loving father, someone who had embraced family life. But behind closed doors, he was still secretly seeing Keishla, who continued to struggle with ending the relationship. According to Eliza, she had suspicions about her husband's infidelity, but each time she confronted him, he would promise in tears that he would end the affair. Keishla had tried on multiple occasions to cut ties with Félix, but he refused to let her go. She never pursued other relationships, as Félix warned her that if he ever discovered she was with another man, it wouldn't end well for either of them. Keishla, who had fallen deeply in love with Félix during their teenage years, continued to hold on to feelings for him, despite everything. Professionally, Keishla followed her passion for working with animals. She landed a job at a veterinary and grooming center, where coworkers described her as diligent, reliable, and kind-hearted. At home, she lived with her 2 dogs and a cat, whom she treated like family. Then in 2020, Eliza discovered text messages between Félix and multiple women, including Keishla. Furious, she confronted her husband, kicked him out of the house, and threatened to divorce him and keep him from seeing their daughter. The warning hit hard. At the same time, Félix's boxing career was in decline, and he couldn't afford more complications. For a brief period, he stopped contacting Keishla. However, that distance didn't last. After a few months, they resumed meeting in secret, and by April 2021, Keishla found out she was pregnant. A drugstore test confirmed her suspicion. She immediately called her sister to share the news, knowing how complex her situation was. Keishla, now 27, had no interest in terminating the pregnancy. She was emotionally prepared to raise the baby, even if that meant doing it alone. Not long after, she informed Félix of the pregnancy. In her heart, she hoped he might accept the news. But his reaction was far from supportive. He became angry and told her to visit a doctor, and if the pregnancy was confirmed, he insisted that she terminate it. Keishla stood her ground and refused. Félix, growing more aggressive, began making threats. He claimed that having an unplanned child outside his marriage would ruin his public image and career, something he couldn't allow under any circumstances. Shortly after Keishla's doctor visit, her pregnancy was. After her visit to the clinic confirmed she was indeed pregnant, Keishla received official documentation verifying it. She called Félix to share the news, but instead of support, he reacted with anger. He shouted over the phone and demanded that she terminate the pregnancy immediately. Once again, Keishla firmly refused. Trying a different approach, Félix claimed he didn't believe her and insisted on seeing the medical certificate for himself. He suggested they meet later that evening in a public location, a request that didn't raise suspicion for Keishla, as they typically kept their meetings discreet to avoid attracting attention. Just days before that scheduled meeting, Félix visited an old friend, Luis Antonio C. Diz. Luis, who worked at a local machine shop, was also known to have connections to illegal activity, including drug distribution. Félix explained his situation and asked for help in permanently silencing his pregnant lover. Though Luis had previously drawn attention from law enforcement and feared getting into more trouble, Félix reassured him that the plan would be clean and untraceable. He even offered a substantial sum of money for his assistance. Ultimately, Luis agreed to go along with it. With a partner in place, Félix contacted Keishla and arranged to meet on the evening of April 29th. He told her he wanted to confirm the pregnancy for himself, and then decide on the next steps. After speaking with him, Keishla called her sister and relayed the conversation, still clinging to the hope that Félix might come around and accept responsibility for the child. Her sister, however, was deeply unsettled. She knew Félix had made threats before and feared he might take things too far. She shared her concerns with their mother, but even together, they couldn't convince Keishla to cancel the meeting. That evening, Keishla drove to the location in her own Kia Forte, bringing the medical documents with her. Félix arrived in his pickup truck, with Luis hidden in the back. Keishla got into Félix's vehicle and handed over the test results. He once again pressured her to end the pregnancy. Keishla, emotional and tearful, refused him again. The conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. Then, without warning, Félix struck Keishla in the head with his fist, knocking her unconscious. Before she could regain consciousness, Félix reached into the glove compartment for a syringe filled with a potent dose of illegal drugs, something Luis had acquired for this exact purpose. He injected her with the substance. Together, the two men moved Keishla's limp body to the bed of the truck, where they had already placed wires and a heavy concrete block. They tied her up, secured the weight, and covered her with a tarp to prevent anyone from seeing what was inside. Félix then climbed back into his truck, while Luis took the wheel of Keishla's car and drove away. The two men drove together toward the bridge spanning the San Jose Lagoon, a location known for being deserted at night. After making sure no one was nearby, they carried out their plan, throwing Keishla, who was still alive at the time, into the water. As a final, brutal act, they fired several shots in her direction using firearms they had brought, aiming to eliminate any chance of survival. After committing the act, the men went their separate ways and returned to their normal routines, attempting to act as if nothing had happened. The following morning, Keishla's co-workers began to grow concerned when she didn't show up for her shift at the veterinary clinic where she worked. Known for her reliability and dedication, it was unlike her to miss work without calling. After attempts to reach her by phone went unanswered, her colleagues contacted her sister Beriz to check if she knew anything. Worried and unable to reach Keishla herself, Beriz decided to go to her sister's home. There was no response at the door, but she had a spare key and let herself in. What she found inside only deepened her concern. Keishla's pets were unfed and clearly distressed, suggesting their owner hadn't been home for some time. Panic set in. Beriz immediately called their mother, and then reported Keishla's disappearance to the police, including the history of threats and problems involving Félix. She also attempted to reach Félix directly, but he denied any involvement, claiming he had been at home with his family the entire evening and night. Keishla's mother quickly flew in from Florida, fearing the worst. One theory she considered was that Félix may have taken her daughter to a private clinic to force her into a procedure against her will, but the idea that something even more tragic had occurred was almost too painful to imagine. Police began their investigation by questioning neighbors and coworkers, but no one had noticed anything out of the ordinary. Simultaneously, news of Keishla's disappearance spread rapidly on social media, with friends and family urging anyone with information to come forward. As the case gained traction, public interest intensified, especially after it emerged that Keishla had been romantically involved with a well-known athlete and was pregnant with his child. Journalists flooded the family with interview requests, and Keishla's relatives didn't shy away from speaking publicly. They openly expressed their suspicions, placing the blame squarely on Félix. On April 30, authorities found Keishla's car abandoned on the eastern side of the city. Her personal items, including her identification, were still inside. The vehicle showed no signs of forced entry or struggle, which gave investigators a small but quickly fading hope that she might still be alive. That hope was shattered the next day. On May 1, a passerby walking across the bridge over the lagoon noticed something unusual in the water, what appeared to be a body. The person contacted authorities, and soon, police recovered the remains of a young woman from the shallow area of the lagoon. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The body matched the description of Keishla Rodríguez, the young woman who had vanished days earlier and whose story had dominated headlines. Her devastated family was called to confirm the worst. Despite holding out hope that the body wasn't Keishla, her family's worst fears were confirmed. Though the remains had been in the water for several days and were heavily decomposed, she was quickly identified by a distinct tattoo on her arm. News of the horrifying discovery spread quickly, sparking outrage across the city. Citizens organized spontaneous demonstrations, demanding justice and accountability for those involved. That same day, Félix Verdejo was brought in for questioning. However, he adamantly denied any involvement in Keishla's disappearance, and claimed he had spent the night in question at home with his family. With no immediate evidence to formally charge him, Félix was released while the investigation continued. A crucial piece of testimony came from Félix's wife, who admitted during her first interview that she had known about his affair with Keishla. However, she claimed to have learned of the pregnancy only after Keishla went missing. More damaging to Félix's alibi, she stated he had not been home on the night of the alleged crime. Investigators quickly turned to reviewing traffic camera footage and were able to spot Félix's pickup truck and Keishla's car traveling one after the other toward the bridge where her body was later found. However, it was clear that Keishla wasn't the one driving her own vehicle. Authorities soon impounded Félix's truck for forensic analysis. Inside, they found strands of hair that matched Keishla's. With mounting evidence, Luis C. Diz, the accomplice, chose to turn himself in. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he agreed to reveal the full story. Félix was arrested once more, but unlike Luis, he refused to speak. He declined to answer investigators' questions and continued to maintain his innocence, despite overwhelming proof. Among the evidence was a firearm registered to Félix, which ballistic tests confirmed had been used in the attack on Keishla. Additionally, cell phone data showed all three, Félix, Luis, and Keishla, had been in the same area the night she was killed. Keishla's funeral was held on May 8th and became a moment of national mourning. Her send-off was broadcast across the country, becoming not only a memorial but also a powerful call to action against gender-based violence. In a symbolic gesture, her coffin was transported not by a standard hearse, but in a white carriage, as white petals were dropped from above. Public figures from across Puerto Rico, celebrities, athletes, politicians, and activists voiced their outrage over the crime, demanding that justice be served. Félix Verdejo was formally charged with multiple crimes, including carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the killing of an unborn child. These charges carried the possibility of the death penalty. However, Keishla's family made a public appeal for the court to impose life imprisonment, instead believing he should spend the rest of his life behind bars, living with the consequences of his actions. The trial faced several delays due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, but by the spring of 2021, legal proceedings had finally begun to move forward. The trial was conducted virtually, and the court concluded that the crime had been carried out by a group acting with prior conspiracy and extreme cruelty, particularly against a pregnant woman. Investigators were able to reconstruct the full sequence of events from that tragic night, largely due to the detailed testimony of Luis C. Diz. Luis did not deny his role. He confessed that, at Félix's request, he had obtained the drug used in the attack, brought along the wire and concrete block, and helped dispose of Keishla's body. His cooperation proved critical in establishing the timeline and manner of the murder. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Félix Verdejo continued to deny any involvement. His persistent claims of innocence did little to sway the outcome. Félix's wife, who testified during the trial, filed for divorce shortly after his arrest. She attempted to distance herself from the case, focusing instead on her business and raising their young daughter. Reports later surfaced that she had remarried. In a rare interview, she revealed that she had received several anonymous threats messages wishing harm upon her and even her child. Some people had speculated that she might have been involved in orchestrating the crime, but authorities found no evidence to support those claims. In the summer of 2023, the jury reached a verdict. After carefully reviewing all the evidence and listening to witness testimonies, they found both Félix Verdejo and Luis C. Diz guilty on all charges: carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. However, despite the convictions, the sentencing phase was still pending. The court scheduled the next hearing for mid-November 2023. It was expected that both men would receive life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring they would never walk free again. This case, which gripped Puerto Rico and resonated far beyond, served as a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of gender-based violence and the need for justice to be swift and uncompromising. If you found this story important or moving, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss upcoming true crime stories and real-life cases that deserve to be heard. Your support helps bring attention to the voices that matter.